went to Harvard Medical School, so it was like that. But I was told generally the French Canadians didn't do that. They came down, and at first they were very a little bit, I don't know what you might say, less trustful or something. I don't know what the word would be. Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, that sounds right to me, because as as my cousin who went to Harvard Medical School explained to me, he said, yeah, they came down and they said, no, 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 buy a house, triplex in Pawtucket. You live in the ground floor. The second floor you rent out, pays your mortgage. The third floor is all profit. Really? Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, and it sounds like Pawtucket. And that was my grandfather was I mean, my father was from an English family. His father had been an insurance um, executive in England, and actually had been an interpreter of French of all things in World War One for the British forces, but moved to the States, and so was working. He was a vice president of an insurance company, a British insurance company in Manhattan. So my father had a higher kind of status than my mother, but he was in the Marine Corps World War II, and he didn't know it at the time, but he was guarding the first radar station. He didn't know what it was. He had this secret thing that he was guarding for, in Rhode Island, looking for German submarines and things. Yeah, there were. So at any rate, uh, they the armed services had a mixer where the soldiers could go and have a dance, and that's where he met my mother. But what was so lovely about it was her brothers were in the Marine Corps also, and so they had a real kind of good bond, and yet there were such class differences. My father loved them because as an executive, I mean, raised in a family with executives, a managerial class, you're following all the rules, because you're going to get fired. You're in a corporate kind of setting. Whereas my, my uncles were what they call quahog pirates. So those clams called quahogs, the government would like block off part of the sections of the ocean off of Rhode Island, saying, we need to let the clams come back. And plus, maybe there's a little pollution here. And my uncles were like, no competition. That's where they go, getting the clams. So, like, forgive all these stories, but my grandfather, Joe Charette, and boy, they got a picture of me 4 years old. We're visiting him in Pawtucket, and he's on this swing in the back of their 3-story place, and he had a rabbit hutch, and here's a picture of me holding this rabbit like this. I didn't realize he was eating the rabbit. I found out years later, and my mother said, yeah, he would eat anything. He would go to the park in Pawtucket with his rifle and shoot squirrels. And one day he brought a skunk back, and that was the only time my grandmother put her foot down. I'm not cleaning that thing. But the family story was that in the great Spanish flu of 1918, my grandfather got the flu, but he took a bottle of whiskey and walked it off in a thunderstorm. My,
So
yeah,
how does the sound from people on Zoom? I'm trying to
yeah,
test
that
this out.
sound numbers. I remember testing the sound. And then my father just loved them, and I did too. I did too.
Does it sound okay? Too loud?
Okay, welcome everybody. Here we are.
I can't hear anybody answering me.
Mm,
Frank, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Yep.
We're good to go?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Yeah, so did I. So did I. All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for your great patience listening to my personal ramblings. All right, we're back. The Tibetan tradition of mental development. Echo. We don't okay, just Dave echoing. Yeah, it's okay. Okay. So we finished with the chapter on refuge last time. I just want to read the last paragraph there. Two types of refuge: causal refuge, which is in someone who has internalized the triple gem, and resultant refuge, which is in oneself after the triple gem has been realized within. When one first takes refuge in the three manifestations of the Buddha, they are an external refuge. But as one develops, this gradually approaches an internal refuge. The external refuge cannot help without the corresponding effects of the disciple. But when both act together, they gradually merge into one. So I think Chogyam Trungpa said that, we learn the Dharma, and then we start doing the Dharma, but in the end, you actually become the Dharma. And so there is this process of internalization, and obviously that is not conceptual. Hard thing for us because we're so used to living in this conceptual mind stream, and of course those forces, those habits, are completely hooked, you might say, to the practice of Dharma. They're given into the path, but then eventually you become the path. And so that's a wonderful thing. It was no longer is this, the separation of someone, like say doing patience. It happens. We're trained in patience. We're trained first in just staying away from hatred and aversion. And so, the mind becomes just not engaged, but recognizing those things, just simple, just staying away. I always get in trouble in this, like that. But then the Mahayana, the next step is actually engaging in it in the sense of compassion for the object, and patience. Yeah. But then eventually, when that has been developed, there's no need to apply those mechanisms, you might say. One is just naturally patient. So someone is insulting everybody in the room, and you're not moved. So that's a wonderful thing, but there's no concept there anymore. And that's realization. So that's a wonderful thing. So at anyway, this next chapter after the chapter on refuge is qualities of the Buddha. And yeah, first, Nirmanakaya, the physical incarnate form, 32 major and 80 minor characteristics. You can find lists of these things, which are kind of interesting. But the former marks, the 32 major marks, signify the Buddha's supreme attainment as one who guides other living beings. And the latter, the 80 minor marks, are signs of inner wisdom. When seeing figures of the Buddha, one tends to want to look closer and closer, yet although the form is pleasing, it is not one to which people become attached. Interesting. The Buddha's voice, so that's his body, is Nirmanakaya. His voice carries far and wide, and with one utterance, he answers the questions of many. At one time, being questioned by a great number of disciples, he answered simply, humanity is impermanent, thus satisfying all the questions, settling all the doubts, his speech having different depths of meaning depending upon the individual disciple's level of attainment. His voice is soft, rhythmic, pleasing, not fading as one moves farther away. And again, it is not a voice to which one becomes attached. When the Buddha was discoursing in Rajgir, Madhgalyayana, by means of his supernatural powers, transported himself to the outer rim of the universe, and even at such a distance one could clearly hear the Buddha's teachings. Whenever one hears the Buddha's voice, the three poisons temporarily vanish. Depending on the needs of the disciples, his voice is able to manifest itself in suitable forms. And, this shows you really the great benefit and blessings, really, of, a realized teacher, because you get tastes of these things. For instance, you can experience that people take different kind of meanings from the same statement that someone like Garon Pache would make, for instance. And you realize it's like this vow of compassion is so inconceivable that it's actually, settling the discords and sufferings of beings on all these different levels, but like simultaneously. And obviously, that is something that is beyond the merely conceptual mind, because you just couldn't. I've always taken, not knowing anything, my introduction to Buddhism had nothing to do with texts or anything. And so coming to the Tibetans and the sadhanas, the means of accomplishment, these sadhana practices, you kind of repeat them like a parrot or something at first, but the more you start to get into them, and then you'll suddenly see, tremendous resonances between different texts, between different parts of the same text. You start to see the internal unity or harmony of it all, these disparate kind of factors, but yet you see how they're but not only working together, but they're really the same wisdom, just manifesting in slightly different ways, so we can look at different facets of this great jewel. And as you do that, you start to have the feeling, is something that was always very sort of convincing to me, that this isn't something that was just composed by some charismatic man or woman in Tibet or India a long time ago. The inner resonance of it is so completely perfect that it strengthens faith through your experience. Madhgalyayana. Yeah, so the 10 great disciples of the Buddha, Madhgalyayana was noted for his special psychic powers. He and Shariputra were, I can't remember, were they brothers or cousins? I think maybe cousins. And, that verse that we do in the sadhanas, the Om Ye Dharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Tathagata, that one, that stems from an interaction where Shariputra and Madhgalyayana were looking, they were searching, and they told each other that they would, in their travels and work, when they came across, they found an enlightened teacher, that they would come back and tell each other. And it was Shariputra who was in Rajgir and saw Ashvajit, who was one of the 5 original disciples of the Buddha. And he was just so struck by the man's demeanor and appearance that he asked him, who are you? And that Om Ye Dharma that we do, that's what Ashvajit replied to Shariputra. And Shariputra realized that he had discovered his teacher, that is Ashvajit's teacher, the Buddha, Shakyamuni. And he went back and told Madhgalyayana. And he also pops up at the end of the Buddha's life too. The Buddha was, I think he was suffering from something like a back or something. He had was having a lot of back pain and difficulty, and they don't know, but it appears on the map, if you look at it, that he was going back to Lumbini, where he had been born. At least that was the direction that he was going in. And he got as far as Kushinagar, and he was in a hut with this kind of difficulty. And there was a non-Buddhist yogi who had been living off in he was 100 years old, they said, and he had been living this very ascetic kind of life. And through his psychic sensitivities, he knew that there was a great teacher, and he had a burning question that he wanted to ask. And so coming out of the Indian night is this old yogi who was not related to anybody in a worldly sense, or not part of the Sangha, nothing, but wanted to see the Buddha. And Shariputra, I don't know if Shariputra was there, but Madhgalyayana, I think it was Shariputra. No, it was Ananda. Sorry, Ananda was there. And Ananda said, no, you can't come. He's, indisposed, so to speak. And the time is very precious. He's leaving us. But then the voice came from inside the hut. The Buddha said, no, let him in. And so the yogi came in to see the Buddha, and he asked this question. And unfortunately, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but the Buddha gave him an answer and completely satisfied him. And he walked back out into the Indian darkness, disappearing. And Madhgalyayana was kind of perplexed at this interaction, and he said, he said to the Buddha, why did you see him? I looked through these psychic powers he's talking about, going to the edge of the known world. I looked, back 100,000 lifetimes. There was no connection in any way between him and any previous Buddha, nothing. And the Buddha said, well, yes, but if you went back 1,000,000 lifetimes, he offered a flower to a previous Buddha. yeah. I think they're all the same flower, Ian. So that's Buddha's body, speech, and now mind. The primary qualities of the Buddha's mind are wisdom, compassion, and the ability to experience both levels of truth simultaneously. His fully enlightened mind is Dharmakaya, which is both capable of manifesting itself in any form and has the quality of omniscience. His love is equal for all living beings, and his mercy is constant. We, as samsaric beings, cherish ourselves first, and our mercy is like the ocean tides, in that it is present when we perceive suffering, but recedes when we see joy. His purpose is to lead those who are ripe, and his mercy is the hook that releases us from the fetters of karma and the kleshas. We have all the potential or seed to attain the complete qualities of the Buddha, but kleshas are the fetters which separate us from this, our true nature. Buddha's actions, in Tibetan, the word is, I can never read it with the transliterations, but it means the act of delivering tidings. The Buddha's action is his manifestation of himself in physical forms, radiating peace and virtue in order to encourage others on the path. When we see someone whom we admire, we naturally seek to emulate him. Therefore, the manifestation taken depends on the type of beings at a particular time and place. The refuge of the Dharma, so that's the Buddha. The refuge of the Dharma is the cause for the attainment of these qualities. The elaborateness of the seat of a teaching Lama betokens reverence for the Dharma. And any language which may be a receptacle of the Dharma should likewise be given respect. Of the actions of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, those of his speech are considered to be supreme. When actually taking refuge, visualize Buddha Shakyamuni with his left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar and his right hand in the earth-touching gesture. The visualization may be either at eye level or above the crown of the head. Then, while repeating Namo Buddhaya many times, visualize a vast abundance of radiant nectar emerging from his alms bowl, entering your body, filling and purifying you. Then, as a symbol for the Dharma, visualize a scripture at his side, and while repeating Namo Dharmaya, visualize the nectar flowing from it and likewise filling your body. Taking refuge in the Sangha, you may either visualize the Buddha himself or a host of bodhisattvas, again seeing the flowing of nectar while repeating Namo Sangaya. The complete visualization then is the Buddha Shakyamuni as the central figure, seated on a throne formed of a lotus, crescent moon, and a sun, one atop the other. as is often symbolically depicted in tankas. These three represent renunciation, bodhicitta, and the realization of shunyata, respectively. So the lotus is renunciation, the crescent moon, bodhicitta, and the sun, the realization of emptiness, respectively. Emptiness. At the Buddha's side is a stack of scripture, and he is surrounded by an assembly of bodhisattvas. Then visualize to your right all male living beings as your own father, and to your left all females as your mother. To the forefront, imagine friends, enemies, and those to whom you are indifferent, all of them taking refuge with you. Especially vividly imagine your enemies, so that bodhicitta directed towards them may be developed. Recollect how helplessly immersed we are in samsara, and that the three refuges are the only means of escape. You have developed some degree of understanding of shunyata. This should now be meditated upon, specifically the lack of self-existence of all beings, including your own self. The triple gem, likewise, does not exist as an independent entity and is not without causes, but rather depends upon the mental labeling of disciples. While developing understanding of shunyata, you must also accept worldly phenomena on an operational level, being careful not to go to the extreme of simply negating everything. Understanding shunyata as simple negation is like holding a poisonous snake incorrectly. This is very dangerous, as it ignores the conventional truth of dynamic phenomenon. A Buddhist is one who takes refuge in the triple gem. Taking refuge is the foundation of all moral conduct and all growth of insight and wisdom, and is thus essential for all spiritual practice development. Further eliminates many of the kleshas of past lives. It is possible to eliminate all past non-virtuous karma, regardless of one's path, and become an arhat in this life. Taking refuge not only speeds one who is accumulating insight and merit towards attaining liberation, but can also give temporary relief from harmful circumstances, such as illness. Truly taking refuge with strong faith is necessary in order for the power of the refuges to take effect. Like a cave, if one does not enter, it cannot give shelter. It is essential, at least, to take refuge in order to prevent oneself from falling back to the three lower realms. At the time of death, if refuge is taken purely, along with the contemplation of bodhicitta, one does not need another person to transfer one's consciousness. Therefore, it is important to acquaint oneself with this now, in order that it will be very familiar at the time of death. So this transfer of one's consciousness, of course, is the POA practice, one of the 6 yogas of Naropa. And it is said that an accomplished master can actually, through the practice of POA, transfer someone else's consciousness to a pure land, or at very least to a better state. But as he's saying, if you know POA yourself, of course, you can do it yourself. But interestingly here, pure refuge and pure aspiration of bodhicitta at the time of death affects the same thing. In taking refuge, strong faith is essential, but far from being an irrational leap based on belief, it must be founded on reason. Faith, the great opponent of dislike and skepticism, is in simple terms similar to liking or attraction. There are 3 progressive levels of faith. The first is clear faith. It is simple admiration, but with no convincing reasons. The second is admiration combined with a desire to emulate the person in whom one has faith. And finally, there is faith with conviction, when one is so convinced of the qualities of the other person as to trust oneself fully to their guidance. Faith is known as the mother of insight and wisdom. One must be attracted to the path in order to be able to progress upon it, and without this faith, the teachings can be of no benefit. Faith does not depend on outward signs, but is totally inward. Milarepa once said, "Oh, you people, you have faith in your lips, but I have faith in my mind." Taking refuge aids one in attaining that for which one strives, acting both as a temporary aid and ultimately leading one to liberation. One Indian pundit advised, do not depend on others for guidance, but rather on the growth of the three refuges within yourself. Trust yourself wholly. Although immeasurable merit is gained by taking refuge, this alone is not enough to attain liberation. One must further be committed to following the individual practices involved for each refuge. Those who take refuge for the Buddha should not take ultimate refuge in ineffective worldly sources. However, temporary refuge may be taken in such things, meaning that one asks for assistance as with a friend. Further, any image of the Buddha, whatever its quality, should be regarded with reverence as if it were the Buddha himself. This is because the truth body enters such figures. Upon attaining the highest level of the path of merit, one sees even a clay statue as the Buddha in his emanation body form. And on the path of insight, one sees it as the complete enjoyment body. So this is referring to the five paths. The path of accumulation, then the path of application, and then that leading to the path of insight, to the path of meditation, to the path of no more learning. Having taken refuge in the Dharma, one must avoid all harmful actions, including thoughts, which lead to suffering for others. If these corresponding obligations are not followed, one nullifies the act of taking refuge, and it will not be effective. The only true offering to the Triple Gem is one's own inner offering of following the path. There you go. The only true offering to the Triple Gem is one's own inner offering of following the path. One should also regard any syllable of the Dharma itself, for all languages are potential vessels for the Dharma. When taking refuge in the Sangha, one forsakes the company of irreligious people and those with wrong views. Until one has full control of the mind, one should not frequently associate with such people, for the mind, like a piece of white paper, is too easily stained. Respect should always be offered to members of the Sangha, for lack of respect is a hindrance, even to highly evolved people. One should treat all other beings with high regard and humility, a trait which leads to rebirth in a respected family, just as avarice is the main obstacle to gaining greater material wealth, so pride is the main obstacle to obtaining wisdom. Wow. All right, the 6 general obligations in relation to taking refuge are as follows. 6 general obligations. First, one should contemplate repeatedly the qualities of the Triple Gem. 2, while remembering the kindness of the Buddha, one should feel grateful, and whatever is eaten or drunk should first be offered to the Triple Gem. 3, one should help other living beings just as one has been helped, giving to them what was effective for oneself. It is important to try to correct the wrong views and practice of others. But of course, this has to be done skillfully. It's not necessarily an easy thing. And there's times when saying nothing is more effective than trying to say something too. So it's great bodhisattva training. You know, it's like you said, the bodhisattva training is one of constantly falling down, and taking refuge is pushing ourselves up again, taking refuge in the 3 jewels. When wrong view is, experienced, similarly, it's by establishing the right view again. So always these antidotes. 4, 3 times each day, morning, noon, and night, one should take refuge, complete with visualization, contemplation of the Triple Gem's qualities. 5, even at the cost of one's life, one should retain reverence for the Triple Gem. If one were to abandon the Triple Gem, the foundation of all one's spiritual practice and growth would be destroyed. And finally, 6th, the general obligation, whatever one does should be done with complete trust in the Triple Gem. It is wise to go for refuge in the Triple Gem, for example, whenever one embarks on a journey. Okay. The Triple Gem is like a fertile field. If you fail to reap the fruit of spiritual growth from it, you waste a wonderful opportunity. Contemplation of the suffering of the lower realm should be done along with taking refuge. First, contemplate the hells, then contemplate renunciation and the three refuges, then meditate on the hungry ghost realm, followed by renunciation and the three refuges, and so forth, alternating from one to the other. Review your past actions, seeing the causes for low rebirth, and know that although you now have the means to attain liberation, you also have this non-virtuous karma working against you. No one else knows all your actions, so you must be your own judge. Be aware of the effects of non-virtuous actions and contemplate the advantages of virtue. Following this, contemplate the triple refuge, the only refuge that is with you always, even through the bardo. The main teaching of the refuges is to live in accordance with the laws of cause and effect, that is, following virtue and abandoning vice. When you practice this every day, it will lead quickly to a change in your life. The teachings of cause and effect. Yeah, Juravka said this weekend, I think she said it. If not, she did say it this weekend. I think she said it when she was here. That, yeah, Garampache, when he, enthroned her, empowered her, told her to teach cause and effect. And I think she does that very well. Getting to the essence of it too. I mean, it's cause and effect is profound. But of course, Garampache has said that the whole Buddha Dharma is just simply emptiness and cause and effect. And they're not two different things, but of course we kind of approach it that way. He said that, the practice of the Mahayana is the wisdom is just regarding all of this as dreamlike, and the compassion is regarding every sentient being as having been your mother. Just that simplicity of that is so, attractive. You can just sort of keep it going. But the path of refuge is so interesting to me. It's such like they say, it's like opening the door. It's so significant, and it's really very rare that one, that one comes to the point in their life where they have enough trust in all of this to take refuge. The great Zen master Dogen said that taking refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, is not something that people are naturally inclined to do. But in the end, we take refuge in all sorts of things. But in the end, it's the final refuge, you might say. It's the final refuge for all. So it has that quality, and it's really something. You see so much through our own, interactions with folks over all these years. People coming to a Dharma center, and the different stories and the different, dramas and the different life experiences and everything. It's just very, very rare, and it's a real blessing to have confidence in this. And like you said, even to be attracted is the first level of faith, and then wanting to emulate, but then this very strong faith of confidence where you can't be shaken anymore. It's a wonderful thing. And of course, it has the immediate different levels of faith have different levels of stability that they apply to your own mind automatically, which is the genius of the Dharma. It's not something that we're applying, although it can be that way in the beginning, but the actual quality of it itself is the benefit, is the realization. And that's really something. This simple kind of faith has a stability to it that is not out there in the worldly beings who are searching from one thing to another. Try this, try this, try this, all these temporary solutions, which of course in the end always disappoint because they can't supply the real thing, so to speak. This combination of certainly confidence. The Sanskrit word I'm told for faith is shraddha, which is better, I'm told, because again, the word in English, faith, we have so many associations with faith, and some of them are there's almost like sometimes culturally there's like a virtue in having faith in something that isn't supported by reason. We think that that's the highest kind of faith or something, whereas that's not it. That's it. So this idea of Shraddha confidence, I think, is closer to it. But of course, it's more than mere confidence. Confidence based on what? Well, certainly the teachings, certainly our own experience, um, and our own, deeply probing mind. In a sense, it's the confidence just coming. That faith is our true nature when it's sincere, unfabricated. And so it's very interesting, like in the Dzogchen teachings, what do they say? They say, it's the faith of the student that like allows him to hook. It hooks into this ring of faith that the Lama has. It hooks into it. So in the highest practices of Dzogchen, it's just like this, it's this simple guru yoga. It's just this confidence, this natural occurring faith opens the heart to the blessings, like they say with Jidgen Sumgen's famous teaching that the Lama is like a snow mountain, and it's the devotion of the student, the warmth that melts, and then that water, the blessings flow as water too, just completely naturally. No one has a fire hose. It's just flowing the way things naturally do. And this realization that it's the inner Lama is ourself. Uh, really total intimacy. So he's putting great emphasis in this chapter on refuge, of course, because it is just that important. The next time um, we're doing, where are we? Sorry. Next one is chapter 9, the law of cause and effect, which is the longest chapter, I think, in this book. And, speaking of kind of the inner harmony of these texts, or even the approaches and the way that things are taught, you see that it's like in Shantideva's Entering the Bodhisattva Path, the two longest chapters, the chapter on wisdom and then the chapter on patience. And when you read it too, the chapter on patience is getting into the same discussion in the chapter on wisdom. And you realize it's kind of like not two different things. And why patience? Well, because for one thing, it's the antidote to anger. And there's such emphasis on anger, or at least overcoming anger, because anger is so powerful and so immediate and so directed at other beings. If you have something like jealousy, for instance, negative, klesha, poison, but at the same time, it's possible you don't see it in the interactions with others. I mean, anger can be that way too. People don't see it, but generally it's more expressive and people feel when someone's angry at them, but they may not feel the jealousy. It's like sneaky. So there's so much emphasis on anger because it, in a sense, is more destructive, immediately. And you see this, you can be friends with people for a long time, and then there can be one moment of, very, very nasty kind of angry expression. And it can destroy a relationship that's been there for years. It's amazing. So that's him touching on refuge. Let's see if we have anything in here. There's a great deal, of course. Yes. Yeah, certainly. And, natural. Yeah. Again, and devotion is one of those words too that, again, can mislead us, linguistically. What's that? Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Yes, that's you want to make sure you have devotion in a proper object of devotion. Yeah. But again, the emphasis not on blind faith. That's what goes back to the the kind of the baggage that comes with the English word faith, Shraddha. And I don't know what the word is in Tibetan, but I don't know Tibetan anyway. I have to ask my daughters. Yeah, that's a good point, Keen. Keen's mentioning the Buddha's teaching to the Kalamas, this tribe in India, and told them that don't believe something because I say it. Don't believe something because some wise guy told you, some wise elder told you that it's that way. But only believe things. He says is like apparently in ancient India, if you were going to buy gold in the marketplace, there's impurities that come with gold, and that you would pound the gold because the impurities would become visible or pounded out. So he said the same way, you have to pound teachings with your own reason and experience. And only after it meets the test in your own experience do you adopt it and practice it. So there's this constant kind of, it's just very sensible, this constant kind of testing and doubt, but not the negative skeptical kind of doubt, which is a clinging basically. That kind of doubt is like, I can't be touched kind of thing. It's like whatever someone says, there are people that always come up with some negative thing to say at that moment. It's like it's a way of establishing yourself as alienated and apart. And we know a Debbie Downer. But rather the doubt, the doubt of a great mind, the doubt of an Einstein, looking out on the universe and trying to wonder, it's like this wonder, both in the sense of an openness, wonder, and open to possibilities, but also you can see the compassion aspect of wonder. It's wonderful. It's like beyond our current knowledge of understanding. So it's that kind of doubt. And I think this, is just the greatness of the Dharma, because you don't have to come into this and somehow think you have to leave your doubt at the door. And there are levels of doubt without even thinking about it. In other words, sometimes there are things that are very strong, in our habit that we've developed, and we've developed these as kind of like defenses, And sometimes it's sensible. You think like in a marketplace, it's good to have doubt. You need to be testing because people will say all sorts of things just coming from their own self-interest, wanting to get you to do something for them, that kind of thing. So you have to have a kind of skepticism, a kind of doubt, a kind of openness and looking and not being fooled. But yet, some of these things, because they're habitual, very strong, you might say. It's just the arising of the mind from moment to moment. But the strength is that the repetitiveness, the way that it comes up without you thinking about it or even being triggered in any way. It's just been kind of the flavor of your mind stream. But the wonder of it is that with this faith in the three jewels, you just keep going. And it can happen in practice that, a deep-seated doubt is suddenly dissolved. It can be very liberating. But the important thing is just not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're all living in these situations of we hear these tremendous stories of the Dharma, and sometimes people get discouraged by themselves, and that's absolutely wrong. It's taught like in the sutric schools. The Tantra. My goodness, we have all these methods that can be applied at the time of death in the bardo itself. That's extremely confidence building. Because in the end, if you're even a skeptical type, it's like, what's the alternative? It's just like that bumper sticker that used to be around in the 60s, he who dies with the most stuff wins. Once you see that that's false, what's the alternative? When you start looking, like the Buddha did with the four sights, the dying person, the sick person. Another one? What would Chenrezig do? Or what's the other one? What would it do? Old age, yeah, old age. Thank you. Old age, sickness, death, and then he saw the monk, who obviously seemed to be having qualities that contradicted those. Yeah, what would Buddha do? What would be the Yeah. I used to have a joke in there somewhere with this. So can you remember what it was? I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, well, let's. I'll drop my attempt at finding a joke that my old mind has forgotten. But talking about the sutric path, right? When the in the Pure Land teachings, all of these repetitions of Amitabha's name, over a lifetime, just millions and millions and millions. And one great master said, people can have the experience of at least seemingly having no kind of, I mean, you're obviously not involved with negative stuff when you're repeating his name. So the time that you're there doing your kind of formal practice, already there's a benefit because at least you're not mucking around in non-virtue. But you can, and the practice of it itself is virtuous. So you're also giving um, kind of a transmission to people just by them seeing what you're doing to the degree that they do. Um, so all of that is there, but one master said, one cannot necessarily experience in a conscious way. Like it just seems like I've just been repeating this stuff like a monkey, for like a parrot rather, for my whole lifetime. But it said all of that merit, the power of it is like focused at the moment of death. And there are reasons for that that are explained in the Book of the Dead. But nonetheless, this is why this fundamental faith is so important. Because Guru Rinpoche said a mind without faith is like a two-headed needle. It just can't do any sewing. It just goes into the ball of yarn and gets stuck. Whereas a single-pointed needle is very useful. It can create all these wonderful things. So too for us. This faith is essential, and yet it can't be phony. And I think one of the great things when you have experience with a great teacher like Garu Rinpoche, it's so easy to be natural around there. I can remember the first time, having going to see him, and I got very, very formal in my mind, and yet it just completely relaxes you and lets you down. It's just this natural flowing. There's no pretense. There's no, you should be sort of fitting into a certain kind of whatever activity. And Tibetan Buddhism, especially, can really intimidate people in that way. They come in and they see all this and they're afraid maybe I'm going to do something wrong. They don't know what they can. And that relaxation of the Lama, of course, is such a helpful thing. So Kempo is very helpful in that way too, because you have all this knowledge of all these methods and teachings and all of that. And yet at the same time, you just see someone kind of relaxed about it. What struck me sometimes when I first came into this in this way was, the difference between, say, a High Lama with this complete kind of humility and naturalness, and then maybe some really stuffed up academic, some great professor is just too full of himself. The difference, there's tremendous knowledge in both situations, but one's knowledge is all compassion. It's all practical about getting rid of our problems, not just accumulating knowledge. So it's, yeah. And that, of course, builds faith. Where are we at? I've been talking too much. Forgive me. But I wanted to get to that chapter on refuge because refuge is the door, opens the door to the path. Well, Geshe Nawan Darge. I can mention that one story about him too. He's passed away now, but he fled Tibet and was in Dharamsala. They put together one of those first publishing houses that the Tibetans did when they got out of Tibet. That was part of this. This book was part of the series that they did. But he was a young boy. I mean, he was like 15, I think, in Eastern Tibet in Kham. And he had the aspiration, and that he wanted to go to Lhasa and he wanted to become a monk and become a great practitioner, all these kind of wonderful kind of aspirations. And so he walked from Eastern Tibet to Lhasa, which is like 3 months or something. And with the naivete that only a Tibetan can have in this way, He walked into the great monastery library at Sarah, and he saw these stacks of books because they put them, the long, narrow sadhanas. They store them with the end sticking out, and they have a little label there. And so he saw these towering things, and his idea was he was going to memorize all the teachings, and that would be it for him. And he saw these books, and he just did 3 prostrations and left. But he came back. His Geshe degree, I think, was from Sarah. After all, and became a great scholar. Yeah, and it's all method. Yeah, we don't have to do it. Right.
Just talking about Frank.
So you better look out. You might have some lama tell you have to memorize this text. But I think about that sometimes. We say I learn by heart, right? There's something about memorization. Even when I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, but when here we would memorize like the Gettysburg Address of Lincoln, or the preamble to is that what it's called? The preamble to the Constitution, and then the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, and you would memorize it. And it is something. And I remember even in language training, they would, like in French, they would have you memorize these little précis, they were called, and they still come up in my mind now. And it's just really funny. And I see Kempo sometimes. Someone will ask him a question, and he'll be going through his mind the things that he has memorized, trying to find the third, whatever it is, whatever he's doing. There is something about my heart. Supposedly, Homer and the Iliad and all of that was all verbal. I mean, it was all oral. It wasn't written down. That was, these people had memorized. And I heard a story once. It sounds too good. I mean, it must be apocryphal. I don't know if this is really true. But someone told me way back in the beginning when I stumbled into this about Tibetans who were like camped at night somewhere in India. And again, out of the darkness, out of the forest, came this Indian yogi. And he sat down to do his night practice. And it was a text that none of them had ever heard of before. So the idea that perhaps things stayed in India that weren't even transmitted and yet had been continually transmitted in this way, you start to have confidence in those kinds of things. And when you think about the effort and the consistency, and from your own life, the challenges and the ups and downs, but to maintain that stream as a culture, a tradition of liberation is just such an incredible human accomplishment. It should be praised and everywhere, and yet, generally people don't even know about it. Kind of funny. Okay. Anything else? Questions? I've been blabbing too much. Then maybe one thing from Gar Rinpoche, and we'll conclude. We have in the Vajrakalaya, that verse. In the beginning of the text where it's talking about may I develop the fortress of the view, and then may I cross the abyss of meditation. I've always loved that because popularly the view of meditation is just kind of like one of just eating lollipops or something. There's no difficulty. Everything's supposed to be easy, and I'm just going to relax, and all of this. Very high view actually can be. But Gar Rinpoche talking about the abyss of meditation. He says, first, the term fortress refers to great conviction, free from doubt, about the preciousness of bodhicitta. Confidence beyond change or transition, Regardless of what others may say or what conditions may occur, from one's own side, no uncertainty can arise. When one has such freedom from doubt about the view, the fortress has been attained. And at the outset, it's all right if one only gives rise to this sort of confidence provisionally based on circumstance. Eventually, it becomes stable and unconditional. Again, so even our doubts, when we have this kind of view, even if it only comes this sort of confidence provisionally based on circumstances. So in other words, you see a lama and you have inspiration. You see a Buddha figure, you have inspiration. You see someone doing something, some kindness in the world, and you feel that kind of inspiration. Those are all provisional. It's not all the time it's happening, but that's not rejected. This is still attaining to the fortress of the view. Once it's there continuously, no matter what, that is attaining to the fortress. But it's all right, like he says. So when the fortress of the view is attained, self and other, samsara and nirvana, love and compassion are all seen as circumstantial and illusory. So in the Dzogchen teachings, they talk about view, meditation, and action. And our Vajrakalaya text is a Dzogchen text, so that's what it's talking about. The view, meditation, and action. So with this view, in other words, the mind is king. When the mind has been trained or attained, even conceptually, then of course the meditation, the growing accustomed to what? Growing accustomed to the view. And how is that done? Through the action. So the natural process there is those three. And so again, Rinpoche says, when the fortress of the view is attained, self and other, samsara and nirvana, love and compassion are all seen as circumstantial and illusory. At this juncture, the perilous abyss of meditation is encountered. The path of meditation is perilous because when difficulties arise in practice, the meditator can give rise to sudden, unmitigated afflictions. And he describes these in a footnote as, Ari did, as in this path of self-liberation, we're like suppressing our negative habits. And that's tremendously virtuous. But as one goes deeper, lower things can like erupt up, and it seems completely contradictory. And yet that's what is called the abyss of meditation, thus unmitigated, he said. Thus, in the second verse, one supplicates the masters of the lineage of treasures, the blessing practice lineage. Again, here's the faith, and with these words, and then he recites it from our text. To the treasure lineage I pray. Choki Wangchug, plumed Rigzin Godam, Sanjay Lingpa, Drime Dorje, Rinchen Palsang, self-freed Padma Ling, Doodle Nuden, Zamling Dorje Sal, Raton, Chogyur Lingpa, and the rest. May I cross meditation's abyss. This one-to-one correspondence with your true nature appearing, your inner Lama appearing as the outer Lama, and then the confidence in this this stream, this electric cord, you might say, but this stream of blessings. This treasure lineage has manifested on the basis of the Bodhisattva vehicle and the secret mantric vehicle, with its emphasis on deity visualization, mantra recitation. In this context, if one wishes to stabilize the view, it is important to do so not only under good conditions, such as during meditation sessions, but also when one meets with great obstacles and negative circumstance, which are referred to as the abyss of meditation. Thus, in all daily activities, no matter what one is engaged in, one should seek to cultivate mindful awareness and the clear appearance of the deity. Once these become stable, whatever one encounters can be brought onto the path without one falling under the power of adverse conditions. Each individual can check the degree of his or her own realization by looking at how he or she responds to negative circumstance. When meeting with unfavorable conditions, one perceives the limit of what has been accomplished through spiritual practice. Once one has reached a certain level of the view, one no longer falls under the power of pleasure, pain, or any other such experience. One is fit to cross the abyss of meditation when mindful awareness cannot be influenced by outer circumstance and when knowing is self-sustaining. Yeah, truly remarkable. I can't believe there's like 500 pages in this book. It's hard to get through a paragraph. It's so powerful. Okay. Anything else? Again, once again, I've talked a lot. I'm inspired by you guys being here. You do? Right. It's the Dharma. It's the Dharma. So let's do a short dedication. Let's see if I get a dedication out of one of these books. If we can. I'm not finding it, so we'll do it ourselves. May the merit from this evening, the involvement, the searching, the seeking of doubt in the Dharma, may all of this benefit all motherly sentient beings. May we never forget the gratitude that we have and empower our path and never rest till all are free. Svaha. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, thank you.